Here are 101 facts about Mercedes. Spoiler alert, they had a lot of firsts. Number 1. Now, it's widely known that Carl Benz made the first automobile, which was called the motor wagon. But what many don't know is that he was also the first person in history to have a driving license, which was just a piece of paper signed by Luxembourg's Grand Ducal Authority. Number 2. The 1954 Mercedes 300 SL was the first production car to have gull-wing doors, making it the most beautiful death trap out there, because if the car ever ended up on its roof, the doors would be stuck closed, trapping its occupants in a mangled, fiery wreck. But Mercedes fixed that issue with the SLS by giving it ejecto doors, cuz seriously, they put bombs on its door hinges, allowing the car to blow its own doors off in the case of a rollover. Number 3. The Mercedes 350 SL was the first car to introduce the 6-digit odometer in 1971, meaning your car would no longer respawn at 100,000 miles. Number 4. When Mercedes was road testing the pre-production model of the 2012 A-Class, they decided to wrap the car in QR codes instead of regular camouflage. And the lucky few who scanned the code won a free trip to the Geneva Motor Show, where the A-Class was premiered. Number 5. Autonomous driving is all the rage nowadays, but Mercedes did it in 1995 by putting a supercomputer in an S-Class. And it wasn't some crude system that could only creep around parking lots. No, sir. The W140 was able to drive on a 1,600-mile trip without any human input, at some point going over 110 miles per hour on the Autobahn, again in 1995. Number 6. There are a few things in nature that don't get along, like cats and dogs, pineapple and pizza, and these two. But that wasn't always the case. In fact, Mercedes built bodies for BMW between 1932 and 1937 because at that time, they kind of had a bromance going on, with BMW publicly praising Mercedes for their build quality. Their relationship went a step further when Mercedes CEO Wilhelm Kissel was appointed on the supervisory board of BMW, and BMW CEO Franz Josef Popp was appointed on Daimler-Benz's supervisory board. This was the auto industry's equivalent of moving in, but that thankfully didn't last, because their rivalry has resulted in some great cars. Number 7. The 1978 Mercedes S-Class was the first car to have ABS. Number 8. Like most other brands, Mercedes has their own special color, which is silver. But unlike other brands, Mercedes didn't choose silver, silver chose them. I'll explain. In 1934, Mercedes was trying to participate in the Nürburgring Grand Prix with their W25 painted in their official white color. But the car failed its pre-race inspection because it was 1 kilo overweight. And since paint really didn't make the car go any faster, they stripped it down to its bare aluminum body overnight, and the legend of the Silver Arrow was born. Number 9. In 2017, 20-year-old Abdennour asked Mercedes USA, "How many retweets do I have to get for you to give me a Mercedes?" And they replied, 20 million retweets. He immediately posted their reply on Twitter where it got 5,000 retweets in an hour. So Mercedes sent him a message saying, "We appreciate your efforts so much, we're clearing the road and handing it over. Here's your new Mercedes." As you could imagine, Abdennour was as excited as it gets, and he thanked Mercedes for their generosity. Apparently, he didn't get the joke, so Mercedes suggested he should use his imagination to hear the roar of the engine. Still completely oblivious, Abdennour offered his address information to receive his brand new Mercedes, to which they replied, "Not necessary, delivered right to your DMs above." Abdennour finally figured it out, and he really didn't appreciate being trolled, so he sent a few angry texts suggesting that this wasn't good for their PR, to which Mercedes replied, "Actually, they didn't. They just ghosted him." Number 10. Mercedes invented the safety crumple zone in 1951, and it was standardized on every Mercedes vehicle 8 years later. Number 11. The Mercedes A45 AMG has the most powerful 4-cylinder ever fitted to a production car, because AMG somehow managed to squeeze 416 horsepower from a turbocharged 2-liter. Number 12. In the 90s, Germany decided to replace its entire fleet of police cars with brand new models. But there was a catch. They weren't going to buy them, they were going to lease them. As you could imagine, automakers of that time didn't like this deal, because it would be extremely hard to resell police cars, which usually go through a lot of wear and tear. Except for Mercedes, who were more than happy to provide those cars under one condition. They had to be silver, because silver cars had a higher resale value. The German government agreed to their demands, and that's why German police cars are all silver. Number 13. Mercedes invented the seatbelt pretensioner system in 1981. Number 14. Renault makes some questionable cars. I should know, I have one. But surprisingly, Mercedes has been using Renault engines since 2012. Like, a lot! In fact, their Mercedes Citan is a rebadged Renault Kangoo. Number 15. In 1989, a Mercedes engineer by the name of Werner Mohn was testing a W124 with his colleagues to see how the car handled snowy and icy roads. He very quickly came to the conclusion that it did not handle it all that well, judging by the ditch he was parked in. And as he was sitting there waiting for someone to rescue him, he started thinking about a system that would correct the car if it went off course. So he pitched that idea to his bosses, and with the help of Mercedes, he was able to invent the Electronic Stability Control System, also known as ESC. Number 16. As a way to prevent their cars from being stolen, the keys on newer Mercedes vehicles will power off after being stationary for 2 minutes, so thieves wouldn't be able to copy its signal. Number 17. The cheapest Mercedes currently in production is the A180, which starts at $34,000. Number 18. When Mercedes needed a high-speed transporter to take their cars to and from races, they built this thing in 1954. It was called the Blue Wonder, and it had a 3-liter 6-cylinder engine from the 300 SL, which made 220 horsepower. Now, 220 horsepower may seem like abysmal power, but it really wasn't, because the Blue Wonder only weighed 2.5 tons thanks to its unibody construction. This stylish truck was regularly seen blazing down the Autobahn at 105 miles per hour with a race car on its back. But many years later, the truck found itself abandoned by Mercedes and left outside to rot. So Mercedes scrapped it in 1967, and it was gone forever. Later on, Mercedes realized what they had done, and they set out to recreate the Blue Wonder in 1993, which took 7 years to finish because the original truck didn't have any schematics of its design. The recreated version is currently on display at the Mercedes Museum with a 300 SLR strapped on its back, just like the old days. Number 19. In 1923, the Mercedes 625 and 1040 were the first cars in the world to have superchargers. Number 20. You know how when planes crash, they immediately start looking for the orange box, which is called the black box? Well, Mercedes has a similar feature called the Event Data Recorder, which in the event of an accident records speed, location, airbag deployment time, number of passengers, traction system data, and a lot more. But it's not as commonly utilized as you would hope, because it's hard to access, and most people aren't even aware of its existence. Number 21. Mercedes produced the Smart car in collaboration with Swatch in 1994, and the name Smart comes from the Swatch Mercedes art program. Number 22. The 1928 Mercedes-Benz Nürburgring 460 was the first armored passenger car in the world. It was called the Nürburg in honor of the Nürburgring, which was built just a year prior. Number 23. Mercedes used biodegradable wire harnesses from 1991 to 1996 as a way to be more eco-friendly. The only issue was, those biodegradable wires degraded, causing all sorts of electrical issues and sometimes costing over $10,000 to fix. For some reason, making your V12 more eco-friendly with wires made perfect sense in the 90s. Number 24. Mercedes has been providing Pope-mobiles for the Vatican since 1930. Number 25. You must know by now that I love weird family cars that have way too much power. Well, this is a practical family hauler that hauls more ass than a bachelorette party bus. The R63 AMG is a minivan that has a naturally aspirated 6.2-liter V8, making 510 horsepower and 630 Newton-meters of torque. It also has a top speed of 170 miles per hour. And by the way, they only made 200 of these wonderfully useless contraptions, which means they're very rare. But surprisingly, they're still really cheap, like sub $30K cheap. Number 26. In 1949, Mercedes invented the conical pin door lock, which prevents the doors from opening in the case of an accident. Number 27. In 2019, Mercedes introduced bounce mode, which allowed the car to jump its way out of being stuck in sand. But since their owners never go off-road, they started using that feature to do this. So this time around, when the electric G-Wagon was announced with its rotating feature, Mercedes decided to advertise it how people would actually use it. I feel like we're gonna start seeing videos of these two spazzing out next to each other very soon. Number 28. When the McLaren F1 GTR started dominating the 1996 FIA GT Championship, Mercedes quickly realized that they needed to build a car to beat the BMW-powered McLaren, and they needed to do it fast. So when the initial sketches for the CLK GTR were finished, Mercedes secretly bought the number 11 F1 GTR from a private team. As soon as the car was delivered, they replaced the body of the McLaren with the CLK's body panels. They also replaced the BMW engine with their own V12, but they kept the chassis because they didn't have time to develop their own. Over the course of a couple of months, Mercedes was able to perfect the body of the CLK right before they crashed it. But that didn't matter because the CLK's design was finished in just 128 days. More impressively, they managed to win back-to-back FIA GT championships in 1997 and 1998. Fun note, this is the McLaren F1 GTR that they used, like the exact same one, because right after they crashed the CLK prototype, it was taken apart and then put back together with its original McLaren parts to be secretly sold at an auction. Number 29. The 1931 Mercedes 170 wasn't just the first car in the world to have hydraulic brakes, it was also the first car to have four-wheel independent suspension. Number 30. The G-Wagon was originally built upon the request of the Shah of Iran because he needed a rugged off-road vehicle for Iran's border patrol, and now that very same car is being used to climb over curbs at shopping malls and house demolitions. Number 31. The 6.3 badges that Mercedes has on their V8 AMGs don't showcase the size of the engine because their V8s are actually 6.2 liters. Those badges are a tribute to their first production V8, which was the 6.3-liter M100 engine found in the 300 SEL. Number 32. Mercedes invented the Attention Assist System in 2010, which is used to detect signs of drowsiness in the driver. Number 33. The Mercedes ML was originally supposed to be a reskinned Mitsubishi Pajero meant to replace the G-Wagon, but fearing that people wouldn't view it as a true Mercedes, they decided to back out from the deal with Mitsubishi and build the ML fully in-house. And as the years went by, the G-Wagon proved itself to be irreplaceable, so Mercedes pulled the plug on the M-Class and renamed it the GL Class, to be presented as a submodel to the G-Wagon. Number 34. The most beloved Mercedes has to be the W123, which had a 9-month wait list from the moment it was introduced in 1968 to its final production year in 1984. In fact, people loved them so much that they would wait outside of the Mercedes factory in hopes of buying them from the factory employees. But no one loved the W123 as much as the taxi drivers who protested in front of the Mercedes factory when it was replaced by the W124. As a result, Mercedes decided to create a special committee to take the complaints of the taxi drivers and continuously improve the W124 over its production cycle, no matter what it cost. Number 35. Mercedes engineers their seats with the help of orthopedic physicians to ensure that their seats support all the vital parts of your body, like your back, kidneys, and knees. Number 36. This is the Mercedes-Benz CL55 AMG F1 Limited Edition, and it doesn't just have the catchiest name ever, it also has the title of being the first ever production car to have ceramic brakes, because it was specifically built to be a Formula One safety car. Number 37. Mercedes-Benz convertibles have a feature called Air Scarf, which blows hot air at your neck so you won't be cold like a peasant. Number 38. You've probably heard the words Benz, Mercedes, and Daimler used synonymously, and if you're not a big Mercedes fan, you probably don't know why. Well, it all comes down to the history of Mercedes, which is a bit complicated, so we'll try to keep it simple. In 1890, Daimler Motorengesellschaft, DMG for short, was founded by Gottlieb Daimler, who was credited for running and winning the first ever motorsport, and Wilhelm Maybach. Yes, that Maybach. Later in 1902, a wealthy investor by the name of Emil Jelinek contracted DMG to create a car for him, which he named the Mercedes 35 HP in honor of his daughter, Mercedes Jelinek. A couple of decades later, DMG and Benz & C, which was owned by Carl Benz, found themselves in a financial crisis due to the economic collapse of World War I, so they decided to merge and create Daimler-Benz in 1929. but they sold their cars under the Mercedes name in honor of DMG's most successful model. The brand later changed its name to Daimler AG in the 2000s, only to change it again in 2022 to the Mercedes-Benz Group. Number 39. The Mercedes logo represents their dominance over sea, land, and air. At least that's what they claim. But in reality, their logo was inspired by the postcard which the Daimler brothers received from their father, because on that postcard, their home was marked by a three-pointed star, and they thought it looked cool. But of course, Mercedes still prefers having a more artistic meaning behind their logo, which is why they contemplated adding a fourth point to their iconic logo to represent their dominance over space as well. But thankfully they didn't, or else we would have seen Tej and Roman floating in an E55. Number 40. Mercedes just announced the MBUX sound drive feature in collaboration with will.i.am, which gives an immersive audio experience by reacting to the car's movement through music, and it's really cool. I doubt anyone will use it, but it's cool. Number 41. This is the Mercedes CLR, which is as fast as it looks. But that gorgeous, menacing look had a fatal design flaw, causing the car to have a lot of downforce in the back and not nearly enough in the front, which is why the CLR literally took flight at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1999. But luckily, the driver was able to walk away from the accident uninjured. Number 42. According to official Mercedes dealers, the hybrid Mercedes C63 SE Performance sold close to 0 units in Germany in 2023, making it one of the worst-selling cars of that year. Number 43. The Mercedes Museum holds a lot of legendary and priceless cars, so in an effort to protect them, Mercedes made an artificial tornado inside the museum in 2007, which twisted itself 34 meters upward, breaking the Guinness World Record for the strongest artificially generated tornado. I know what you're thinking, and no, that tornado is nowhere near strong enough to lift or damage the cars, but it's more than strong enough to suck any fires out of the museum and up in the sky. Number 44. Mercedes is currently suing Lenovo over copyright infringement because Mercedes claims that they have trademarked the three-pointed star logo, and Lenovo has used it unlawfully. This trial will probably take a couple of years to get settled, but who do you think will win? Number 45. This is the most expensive car Mercedes has ever sold. It's called the Maybach Exelero, which is a one-of-one twin-turbocharged V12 monster. It was built because a German tire manufacturer needed a car to test their new line of high-speed tires. And with a top speed of 218 miles per hour, Mercedes definitely delivered for $8 million, which is pennies compared to the 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR Uhlenhaut Coupe, which was sold for $142 million, making it the most expensive car ever sold at auction. Number 46. Jaguar built cars under the Daimler name and badge from 1960 all the way up to 2009 because Jaguar had purchased the company that owned the rights for the Daimler name and brand. Number 47. The Mercedes 190e was originally supposed to be a rally car, but the introduction of the Audi Quattro forced Mercedes to enter DTM instead, which in turn forced BMW to build the E30 M3. Fun fact, Ellen Luer became the first and only woman to win a DTM race, and she did it in a Mercedes 190 Evo 2. Number 48. In 1997, a Swedish car magazine did the Elk test, now commonly known as the Moose test, on the Mercedes A-Class, where the car flipped over. So other magazines started performing the same test, resulting in this now iconic cover. This really didn't look good for Mercedes, especially because they kept bragging about how the A-Class was the safest car in its class. The production on the A-Class was immediately halted in response to the ever-so-growing scandal. After internal testing, Mercedes fixed the issue by changing the suspension and making ESC standard on all models, and after the updated model was reviewed by journalists, the A-Class went back into production in 1998. Number 49. The two-tone paint option on a Maybach takes over a week to be applied because the upper portion of the car gets prepped and painted after production, with the dividing line being brushed on by hand. Number 50. Mercedes made not one but two rotary engines for the C111. The first one was a 3-rotor made in 1969, and the second one was a 4-rotor built in 1970. But sadly, this car was only intended to be a prototype, and it was the last farty-fart Dorito engine Mercedes ever made. Number 51. The Mercedes S-Class will raise its suspension in the case of a side impact to minimize damage and the risks of rolling over. Number 52. Mercedes has a system called pre-safe, which is meant to prevent or reduce the severity of accidents. For example, if the car detects an unavoidable accident, it will emit a brief rushing noise through the speakers, causing the stapedius ear muscle to close up, preventing the passenger's hearing from being damaged by the loud crashing noises. Number 53. As Abdenur would tell you, Mercedes has a habit of trolling, especially when it comes to other brands, and specifically BMW. So when BMW posted an ad in 2021 saying BMW always ahead with a Mercedes in a very weird high angle, Mercedes quickly responded with this. To be clear, I've always been a massive BMW fan, but even I can admit that this was pretty smart. Number 54. Mercedes decided to put the engine from the CLK GTR in an S-Class. Although slightly detuned, the 7.3-liter V12 W140 made 525 horsepower and 550 foot-pounds of torque, giving it a top speed of 155 miles per hour. Pagani also used a more powerful version of that engine from 2006 to 2017. Number 55. The E55 AMG was the fastest sedan in the world in 2003, thanks to its 5.4-liter supercharged V8. It also had the same brake calipers as the McLaren SLR. Number 56. Electric Mercedes vehicles make an acoustic sound at low speeds, so pedestrians would hear them coming. Number 57. You don't need to have common sense when you drive a Mercedes, which is why their air conditioning systems use GPS navigation to automatically turn off the outside air circulation if you enter a tunnel, and automatically turn it back on when you leave the tunnel. Number 58. In 1998, Mercedes and Chrysler came together in what they called the merger of equals to create Daimler-Chrysler AG, which was a monumental mistake for both brands, mostly due to difference in their cultures, because Mercedes and their counterparts took pride in their products, and they viewed Chrysler's products as inferior. Mercedes dealers also refused to put Dodge and Jeep products in their showrooms. To make things worse, the CEOs of the two companies reportedly didn't even speak to each other, and in 2001, the combined value of the two companies had fallen to almost half their original value, with Chrysler losing 15% of its market share in the US. Realizing that this merger might kill both brands, Mercedes and Chrysler parted ways in 2007. Number 59. The Mercedes Sprinter vans are some of the most popular vans in the world, especially in Europe. But in the early 2000s, Mercedes would build the vans in Germany, then partially disassemble them to be sent to the US, where they would be reassembled as Dodges. Mercedes did this so they wouldn't have to pay the chicken tax, which required automakers to pay a 25% tax on imported cargo vehicles. Number 60. In what could only be described as stupid levels of hypocrisy, Chery, the Chinese automaker mostly known for ripping off their designs, sued Mercedes in 2017 because the Mercedes EQ lineup was infringing on Chery's EQ trademark. They ended up reaching a settlement which granted Chery the rights to use EQ, EQ followed by a number, and EQ Tech, leaving Mercedes with EQ Power and EQ followed by a letter. Number 61. In 1909, the Blitzen Benz became the first car in the world to break the 200 km/h speed record. It was powered by a 21.5-liter four-cylinder engine that made 200 horsepower, which was unimaginable back then. Number 62. You know how they say behind every great man is a great woman? Well, they don't get any better than Bertha Benz, because she didn't just fund her husband's project when she was his fiancée, she also took the motor wagon on a 130-mile round trip to promote Carl's invention. On her historic trip, she both influenced and scared the shit out of a bunch of people, because it was the first mechanical horse and carriage they had ever seen, making her the first person in history to make a road trip in a car. And since the motor wagon used benzene as fuel, which was only available in pharmacies, the Weissloch pharmacy that Bertha refueled at became the first ever fuel station. Bertha Benz was also the first car thief in history, because she took the motor wagon without her husband's knowledge. She was a certified badass. Number 63. Mercedes dumps the body of their cars into a 52-ton tub of primer, with the undercarriage being coated in 25 pounds of anti-rust solution to ensure the longevity of their cars. Number 64. The highest mileage Mercedes in the world is a 1976 240D, nicknamed the Blue Legend, which spent most of its life as a Greek taxicab until it was donated to the Mercedes Museum in the early 2000s with over 4.6 million kilometers on its odometer, which is enough to go to the moon and back 6 times. Number 65. Like most European brands, Mercedes made tractors from 1973 to 1991. Number 66. Mercedes-AMG still implements the one-man, one-engine method, meaning that one person assembles the entirety of an engine from start to finish. That person's signature is also displayed on the engine cover. Number 67. Remember when BMW made the E36 Compact, which was met with immediate criticism and was instantly dubbed one of the worst cars BMW had ever made? Well, Mercedes took that as a challenge, and they built a competitor 14 years later called the CLC, which of course failed miserably. In this situation, BMW and Mercedes were basically the only players, and they were both fighting for second place. Number 68. This isn't a Mercedes G-Wagon, it's a Puch G, which is actually a G-Wagon. I know, I'll explain. The original G-Wagon, which was built for the Shah of Iran, was a joint effort between Mercedes and Steyr-Daimler-Puch, who were well known for making reliable military vehicles. Their contract with Mercedes stated that the G-Class would be sold as Puch G in Austria, Switzerland, Yugoslavia, Magnolia, and Eastern Europe. The Puch Gs were also a bit different from the G-Class because they were more utility and off-road driven in their setups. The Puch G was discontinued in the year 2000. Number 69. The new S-Class has cameras embedded in the overhead control panel, which are used to constantly monitor its occupants to help them without their input. For example, if you start looking for something in the car, it will automatically turn on the lights for you. Number 70. The 1993 C36 AMG was the first car to be jointly developed by both Mercedes and AMG. Number 71. The ever-so-pretty Mercedes W126 was in production from 1975 to 1991, making it the longest-running S-Class series with over 850,000 units sold in 12 years. Number 72. The W220 Mercedes S-Class has been dubbed the worst Mercedes of all time, even though it had all the bells and whistles you would expect from an S-Class. The main issue was the Mercedes CEO at that time prioritized profits by lowering production costs, which in turn lowered the build quality, making it the most unreliable Mercedes S-Class ever built. Number 73. You know how foldable hardtop roofs were all the rage in the early 2000s? Well, as usual, it all started with Mercedes when they unveiled the SLK prototype in 1994 with its Vario roof design. Now don't get me wrong, Mercedes weren't the first to make a convertible hardtop. No, that was the ever-so-terrible Peugeot, but they were the first to make it usable and practical. That's why everyone copied their design. Number 74. Brabus always leaves the Mercedes logo on their steering wheels untouched, because if they didn't, they would have to get their airbag covers tested and certified for each model, which would cost them a fortune. Number 75. In 1923, Benz and C built the first ever diesel truck, and in 1936, the Mercedes 260D became the first mass-produced diesel car in the world. Number 76. In 1955, at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in France, the Austin Healey of Lance Macklin collided with the Mercedes 300 SLR of Pierre Levay, sending the Mercedes into the spectators area where it disintegrated and killed 83 people in what has been described as the most catastrophic crash in motorsports history. As a result, Mercedes backed out of all motorsports until 1987, and Switzerland banned all motorsports in their country. That ban was lifted in 2022, 67 years later. Number 77. In 2015, Mercedes-Benz made a 27-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons to rename the Georgia Dome to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's not clear how much Mercedes paid for this deal, but experts have said that it probably cost them around $400 to $700 million, making it the largest marketing deal in the company's history. Number 78. If an electric Mercedes gets involved in a severe accident, it will send a high-voltage pulse to short out the drivetrain, keeping the battery safe by irreversibly damaging the motors. Number 79. When Mercedes decided to go into the pickup market in 2017, they partnered up with Nissan to use the Navaris platform as a way to cut down on development costs. The result of this partnership was the Mercedes X-Class, which was such a production failure that it had a production cycle of less than 3 years. Number 80. In 1940, the weird, angry little mustache guy gifted a 1938 Mercedes to the King of Nepal, making it the first and only car in Nepal at that time. By the way, this is actual footage of how it was transported to the king, because there were no roads back then. After spending a couple of decades in storage, the car was used by an engineering college to train mechanics, until it was rescued in 2008 and was put on display in a museum. Number 81. In 2005, Mercedes made a bionic car which was designed after a boxfish. But that's not the weirdest thing about this car. The weirdest thing is its catalytic converter, which is drenched in animal urine. Because Mercedes claims that the properties in animal urine neutralizes the harmful nitrogen oxide particles. I just feel bad for the poor intern whose #1 priority was collecting animal piss. Number 82. More than 40% of the cars in Albania are made by Mercedes, and for a very good reason. Most of them were stolen. You see, when the communist regime ended in Albania in the 1990s, its borders opened up, which made it a great place for thieves to send their stolen cars to. Because the country wasn't stable enough to fully control its borders, and since the Albanian Communist Party's brand of choice was Mercedes, they were viewed as a status symbol, which made Mercedes a hot commodity in Albania. Number 83. In 2002, Mercedes released the C30 CDI AMG. Yes, this is the only diesel AMG ever made, which had a 5-cylinder turbo diesel that made 230 horsepower at 3,800 RPM. And as you would expect, this car failed. In fact, it failed so miserably that Mercedes didn't even announce its discontinuation because they knew no one cared. Number 84. In 1906, Mercedes built the Mixed Hybrid, which many consider to be the first true hybrid. It had a gasoline engine in the front, which was connected to a dynamo that supplied power for the 2 motors in the rear. It also had a claimed top speed of 75 miles per hour. Number 85. The Mercedes Formula One Petronas team is the first and only team to win 8 consecutive Constructors' Championships. Number 86. At 21 feet, the Mercedes Maybach S650 Pullman is the longest sedan currently in production. It also has an armored version which costs around $2 million, making it the most expensive Mercedes currently on sale. Number 87. When Mercedes unveiled the 6x6 G-Wagon in 2013, they were very proud of what they had created, calling it their first 6x6, which is not true, because they made another 6x6 back in the day for a certain someone who they weren't very proud of. It was around the same time when they were making tank engines for the German military. Number 88. Mercedes uses their automatic wiper sensors to automatically close their sunroofs if it starts raining. Number 89. Mercedes has made a lot of cool concepts over the years, but the coolest and quirkiest one has to be the F-Cell Roadster, which is a modern version of the original motor wagon built 120 years ago. It has a carbon fiber body with a wooden floor, and it runs on a fuel cell. Once the car was finished, it was driven on the same route that Benz took when she was promoting the motor wagon. Number 90. This is the fastest street-legal SUV in the world. It's a Brabus 900 Rocket Edition, which is based on a Mercedes AMG GLE 63S. It makes 900 horsepower and 922 pound-feet of torque from a twin-turbocharged V8. And it has a 0 to 60 time of 3.2 seconds and a top speed of 205 miles per hour. It also goes from the showroom to your garage in just $480,000. Number 91. The Mercedes AMG 1 is based on Lewis Hamilton's Formula One car, so it's literally a road-legal F1 car. Can't wait to see Ferrari's own Lewis-inspired hypercar. Number 92. For some reason, Mercedes made a pretty kinky ad in 2016, where they covered an SL and a Russian supermodel in latex. I'm all in for expressing your artistic vision, but I strong-heartedly believe that the only reason this ad was approved is because someone really wanted to see Natasha Poly in latex. I'm not complaining, but that's the only logical explanation. Number 93. This is a Mercedes 240D chiseled out of a single block of solid stone. It sits on the final resting place of Raymond Say, who dreamed of buying a Mercedes 240D when he grew up, but sadly he never got the chance because he tragically passed away at 15. Many years later, his family built him this tombstone, so their son's passion would never be forgotten. And it has now become a place where fellow Mercedes fans go to show their respect for Ray and his impressive 240D. Number 94. Every G-Class has to complete a 5.6-kilometer route on Schokl Mountain to be approved for production. Number 95. The jury is still out whether it was Mercedes or BMW who invented the soft close feature, but both companies have suffered from lawsuits, with Mercedes having the more recent example. Because in 2022, a man from Arizona sued Mercedes for $500,000 when his finger was cut off by the door of his GLE. We tried to find out what happened with that lawsuit, but we couldn't find anything. Although chances are the judge will throw it out. Because when BMW had a similar lawsuit against them in 2017, the judge dismissed the case, saying it would be unfair to hold these companies accountable, because people have been slamming doors on their fingers since doors were invented. Number 96. When Mercedes wanted to build their presence in the Korean market, for some reason they decided to partner up with SsangYong in 1991. And as you would expect, SsangYong immediately started making this their shtick, advertising their cars as a more affordable Mercedes. They even copied their designs and miraculously managed to make them look like complete dog shit. I'm not being harsh here. I've seen these cars in person, and they look even worse. Number 97. When you look back at AMG's success story, you will arrive at this car, which is called the Red Pig. It was originally a Mercedes 300 SEL, which AMG modified in 1970 to make 428 horsepower from a 6.8-liter V8. It was also much wider and lighter than the original 300 SEL. Later, at AMG's debut as a brand in the 24 Hours of Spa, the Red Pig managed to get second place, winning its class and putting AMG on the map. Number 98. Mercedes acquired a controlling share of AMG in 1999, renaming the brand AMG into Mercedes-AMG. Number 99. Mercedes has a system called Active Body Control, which keeps the car's body straight to provide a more comfortable ride and better handling. And the 1999 Mercedes CL was the first car to have this feature, which has been emptying bank accounts ever since. Number 100. The 2002 Maybach Type 57 used solar panels to power its AC and infotainment system. Number 101. For some reason, Mercedes has placed the cap for the washer fluid on the fender of the EQS. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you can vote for which brand comes next.